Today, we're looking at a blue ink by KWZ, their Iron Gall Blue #3. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below so that if you're in a hurry, you can skip around, but if you got the time, check out the entire video. Also, if you're interested, you can follow me over on Instagram, and if you're new here, I would invite you to subscribe. I do a new ink review daily. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Viscosity Van Gogh with a medium nib. I wrote with it for a day, and then made sure I took my notes with it for this video. This first writing sample is done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. Additional papers will show up later. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, so it came in a vial like this. And to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X 450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X 750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen. It does offer some shading throughout. Now the extra fine is darker than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, and again there's spots of shading throughout, as in much darker spots, even though this is a pretty dark blue. 7 seconds to dry. Medium is significantly darker than everything on the page with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 15 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show no color variation, although there is a peppering of color through the extra fine. Tomoe River. No bleeding, normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is darker than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 13 seconds to dry. Medium is by far the darkest tone on the page with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 22 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both are showing no color variation, and we get none. And Rhodia. No bleeding, no ghosting, not a bleed spot transfer from another page. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen. It does show spots of some shading going on. The extra fine is just a tad darker, I think, than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. Few spots of shading that can be found, like brown starts darker and gets lighter. Quick starts lighter and gets darker. So there is some there, just not tons. 8 seconds to dry. The medium is significantly darker than everything on the page with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 15 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show no color variation, although we see spots of it with the extra fine. I agree with Vita that we can learn a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we get this nice blue, a sort of, I'm going to call it a dirty area, but that's because we see the blue and a kind of gray there, and then a dark blue and a certainly black line at the top. It looks like a lot of blue blacks that I've looked at. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And the blue is much more there on the bottom of the filter paper. That dirty area is moved down a little bit closer. The ink itself is not traveling as far up, but that second occurrence of the black is still there at the very top. Here, I let it dry for 24 hours before I dunk it into water. And what's very interesting is there is some change, but it's not as drastic as I would have expected. The blue on the bottom is very much there. That dirty line is still kind of there. We still see some of the blue, but that black that used to be at the top is kind of an off-white color that's now gathering at the top of it. It's very interesting in that I expected less of this to be moving. This one I let dry for 72 hours before I dunk it into water. Now, a lot of that blue is very much there on the bottom. That sort of what I'm calling the dirty area where the blue and the gray are is still there. It's not as much. There's still quite a bit of blue moving up, and we still have that kind of ivory tone at the top. I'm really very surprised by how much of this ink is moving 3 days after it was in the filter paper. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, I am very surprised by how much of this, that any of it could move. The capital H having a little bit of blowout, I wouldn't use it for note taking. I'm shocked that that happened. This should have been completely bonded with the paper, and I don't know what's going on here. It's obviously one of the dyes that's not as permanent, but just wow. Now water is lifting most of the blue out of the way, really leaving all those grays behind. Water is all that I needed to get this out of my pen. I didn't have to go any farther than that. Pen flush does everything that water does, just a little bit more. You do see that it is just starting to lift it or break it down just a little bit more, but not a ton. It's in 3 days, I expected this to have bonded with the paper a little bit more than it did here. Bleach, still a surprise, has completely removed it from the paper. It does leave a little bit of a brownish staining behind, but I'm surprised that the bleach completely removed it. Again, water is all that I needed to get it out of my pen. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Viscosity Van Gogh with a medium nib. I wrote with it for a day and then made sure I took my notes with it for this video. KWZ's Iron Gall Blue number 3 has a viscosity of 3.19, making this a drier ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average all of those. Now, for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. KWZ's Iron Gall Blue number 3 has an average dry time of 13 seconds, putting it right on the edge, but normal. Instead of finding inks that look like KWZ's Iron Gall Blue number 3, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I wanted a nice red, and I chose Diamine's Red Dragon. The second writing sample was done on Levenger, Black and Red, and Strathmore calligraphy paper. Here we're looking at Levenger paper. Now, we get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is just a tad lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 6 seconds to dry. Medium is quite a bit darker than the extra fine or the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 10 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show no color variation, and we didn't get any. Black and red notebooks, with no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 had no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 4 seconds to dry. Medium is significantly darker than everything else with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 7 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show no color variation, and we didn't get it. And Strathmore calligraphy paper with no bleeding, no ghosting. Now I have to go ahead and preface this, all of this. This is not feathering that's occurring all over the place. This is a laid paper, so it's got a texture on it. And so everywhere that's looking like all this feathering, although visually it winds up being the same thing, it is not feathering, it is the texture of the paper. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is about the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. It has a peppering of shading throughout, some darker areas, like the word the is quite a bit darker than the word dry. Quick starts lighter and gets very dark at the K, 5 seconds to dry. Medium, significantly darker than everything on the paper, as has been normal, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 8 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine does show some color variation, and we do get it in the writing. Medium shows none, and we got none, and that is all that I have for the writing sample. So what do I think of KWZ's Blue Iron Gall number 3? I think this is a slightly nicer tone than we got with their number 2. I was surprised by how not permanent their Iron Gall inks are. And they do clean out of pens very well, which is good news for people who have a fear over Iron Gall inks. So what nib and pen give the best writing experience with this ink? It can offer shading in your drier pens, but I found that the tone was most pleasing with a wetter pen, like a wet medium. I do new ink reviews every single day, so if you're new here, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.